My name is Elaine McKini. I'm 62 years old, a widow, a mother, and tonight, a woman dressing up for what might be the last time her daughter ever looks her in the eye without an agenda. The burgundy dress I'm wearing has history. I wore it to Rachel's high school graduation, to her college ceremony, and when she was promoted to senior associate, she used to say I looked regal in it, like someone who had stepped off the pages of a fashion magazine. Now, as I smooth the fabric down my sides, I wonder if tonight, that version of us will finally vanish. 3 weeks ago, Rachel and I had an argument, not a heated moment, a full-on, soul-punching, breath-stealing fight about her wedding. She and Carter wanted $65,000 from me. Not a request, a demand, as if the life insurance money from my late husband, what I'd saved for my retirement, was their inheritance by entitlement. "You're being selfish," Rachel said, her tone frigid and sharp. "You're sitting on a fortune while we're trying to build a future. Don't you want me to be happy?" I told her joy didn't need imported stone centerpieces, personal chefs, or a Maldives honeymoon. I offered $15,000, a generous amount for a heartfelt celebration, but the way she looked at me, you'd think I'd spit on her wedding dress. That look stayed with me, the one that replaced glittery Mother's Day cards and whispered bedtime promises with something colder, distant. Then last Tuesday, she called while I was pruning lavender outside. Her voice had changed, gentler, cautious. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking, maybe we were both too stubborn. Can we talk? Over dinner?" Hope caught me off guard. Maybe the time apart had made her reflect. Maybe being 3 months pregnant had shifted her view of what sacrifice means. I said yes before my heart even settled. She added, "Carter and I want to take you out, to Franco's." Franco's, the cozy Italian spot where Harold and I toasted our 25th anniversary, where the lights glow low and the sauce tastes like memory. It felt symbolic, intentional. Driving there, I passed the library I used to volunteer at, the park where I pushed Rachel on the swings until sunset, the center where I taught her to waltz before her first dance. Every landmark whispered, "You were there." Franco's was just as I remembered, mums overflowing from window boxes, candlelight flickering behind linen-draped glass, the air rich with basil and nostalgia. I arrived at 6:30 sharp. Rachel always valued punctuality, just like her dad. The hostess led me to a table where Rachel sat glowing. Pregnancy suited her, her hair curled softly, her designer dress radiant. She looked like a woman in control of her story. "Mom," she smiled, rising to hug me. Her embrace held a trace of our past. For a moment, I felt like her mother again, not a checkbook with a heartbeat. "You look lovely," I said. "How have you been feeling?" "Better. The second trimester's easier," she said, settling back into her seat. "Carter's running a bit late. He'll be here soon." Carter, 36, ambitious, charming to a fault. Something about him always felt calculated, like he was constantly pitching someone, even in silence. "I'm glad you called," I said. "I've missed you." Her expression flickered, regret, maybe, guilt? But before she could respond, Carter arrived, with company. 3 men in dark suits followed, briefcases in hand, eyes sharp. "Mrs. McKini," Carter greeted, too smoothly, like a salesman closing a deal. "Thank you for coming." They pulled up chairs uninvited. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a dinner, this was a setup. "Rachel," I asked gently, "who are these men?" She hesitated. "Colleagues of Carter's. They just want to go over something with you." The silver-haired man across from me smiled, practiced and predatory. "I'm Richard Kirk, Carter's attorney. We've drawn up a few documents we think are in everyone's best interest." That ache returned to my chest, the same one from 3 weeks ago. "What kind of documents?" Carter leaned forward. "Just a power of attorney, so we can help manage your assets. You're alone now, and at your age, it makes sense." "At my age?" I said slowly. "Carter, I'm 62, not senile." He chuckled. "Of course, but finances, investments, they're a lot. You shouldn't have to stress over all that." I looked at Rachel, begged her with my eyes to stop this, to speak up, to remember who raised her. But she stayed quiet, still. The attorney slid a folder toward me. "Sign here, and here, initial here." I opened it. Everything, every account, every investment, every corner of the life Harold and I built, was there, laid out like a buffet they expected to feast on. And Rachel didn't blink. "If you don't sign," she said softly, not looking at me, "you won't be part of your grandchild's life. It's your choice, Mom." Something inside me broke, and then reset, like ice forming over still water. I reached into my purse, past my wallet, past the photo of my children I'd carried for years. My fingers found my phone. "Mom," Rachel asked, her voice wobbly now, "what are you doing?" I didn't answer. I called David. He picked up quickly. "Hey, Mom, everything okay? I need you to come to Franco's, now." I hung up and set the phone on the table beside the folder. "I think someone else should be part of this discussion." Silence followed, the heavy kind, the kind that creeps in when a plan begins to collapse. Carter shifted in his seat, the lawyers exchanged glances, the look of men realizing the easy win had slipped away. "Mom," Rachel said, her voice dipping into that familiar whine from her teenage years, "you didn't have to call David. This was supposed to stay between us. Was it?" I replied, "You brought lawyers to dinner. That's not family, that's business." Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should speak privately. These things can get emotional." I met his eyes without flinching. "They already are." "Can they?" I asked, locking eyes with Henry. "How thoughtful of you to notice." David would take about 20 minutes to get here. That meant I had 20 minutes to stand my ground. Henry leaned in, his charm flipping back on like a switch. "Look, Mrs. McKini, may I call you Elaine?" "You may not. You may call me Mrs. McKini." That threw him off. "Good. Of course, Mrs. McKini," he said, recovering with a stiff smile. "There seems to be a bit of confusion. We're not trying to take anything from you. We're here to help streamline your assets, optimize your portfolio, secure your future." "And how much would that help cost me?" "I'm sorry?" "Your fee," I said calmly. "What's the price tag on this helpful little service?" The attorney stiffened. Henry's jaw clenched, just barely. "There would be some small administrative fees, naturally, but this is about family, about making sure Rachel and the baby are protected." "The baby?" I turned to Rachel. "Tell me, when did this plan start? Before or after you invited me to dinner?" "I don't know what you're implying." "It's a simple question." She crossed her arms. "Fine, we've been discussing this for weeks, since it became clear you didn't care about securing my future. That's what we're calling extortion now." "It's not extortion," she snapped, loud enough to turn heads from nearby tables. "It's family. This is what family does." "No," I said softly, but firmly, "family shows up. They support each other, without strings and without threats." One of the younger lawyers leaned forward, nervous, green, still convinced this was just a business transaction. "Mrs. McKini," he said, "just so you're aware, grandparents' rights in this state are fairly limited. If your daughter chooses to restrict access—" "Excuse me." The voice came from behind. Everyone turned. David stood there, still in scrubs, ID badge clipped to his collar, hair a bit tousled from a long shift. At 37, he had his father's calm intensity, and my mother's eyes, the kind that cut straight through pretense. "I'm Dr. David McKini," he said. "Mom called me. What's going on?" "I did," I said. "Please, sit." He nodded once to Henry, then turned to me. "Talk to me." "They want me to sign over power of attorney," I said. Rachel interjected. "If she doesn't, she won't see her grandchild." David's jaw tensed, just like Harold's used to when something crossed a moral line. He picked up the folder and flipped through it casually. "Power of attorney," he muttered. "Mom, did you ask for help with your finances?" "No." David shut the folder. "Carter, Rachel, gentlemen, I'd like a moment alone with my mother." "Hold on," Carter started. David didn't raise his voice. "I'm not asking." There was something in his tone, calm but immovable, that made even the lawyers hesitate. They stood and shuffled toward the bar. "Don't make any rash choices," Richard Kirk called over his shoulder. When they were gone, David turned to me. "All right, talk to me. What's really going on?" For the first time that night, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not fear, not fury, relief. Someone still saw me, not as a source, but as a person. "They want control," I said quietly, "and if I don't hand it over, they'll use the baby as leverage." He was silent for a beat, then asked gently, "Are you having trouble, Mom, with memory, focus? Last week I caught a mistake in my tax bill and saved $800. That sound like someone who's slipping?" He smiled faintly. "No, that sounds like the woman who taught me how to balance a checkbook at 10, who paid off a house alone, who got me through med school." He glanced toward the bar. When did Rachel become this person? I didn't have an answer, just the weight of a heartbreak that had no clean origin. But I knew one thing, I wasn't going to let it break me. 3 weeks passed. Not a single call from Rachel, no updates, no apologies, no photos of the nursery I'd helped decorate. But I didn't sit by the phone. I planted tomatoes, repainted the living room, replaced the heavy curtains Harold picked out with ones that let the morning sun flood in. I started living in my home again, not just existing in it. Every Thursday at 9 a.m., sharp, my new neighbor Janet knocked on my door, armed with coffee, a casserole, or a story about her grandsons. We'd met 2 days after the dinner. She had just moved into the duplex next door after her children tried pressuring her to sell and move in with them, not because she needed help, but because they wanted the equity. Janet said no. Then she brought over blueberry muffins and told me, "I think we might understand each other." At 67, she had silver hair and steel in her eyes, the kind of woman who'd learned, probably the hard way, how to hold a boundary and never blink. One morning, over coffee, she told me about a group she'd heard of at the community center. For women like us, she said, women who've been targeted. Targeted. It was the first time anyone had said it plainly. No pity, no judgment. I was curious. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a modest room at the Meridian Community Center, folding chairs arranged in a circle, a dozen women, stories I already knew in my bones. A retired nurse who had been tricked into co-signing on a second mortgage. A grandmother whose daughter emptied her retirement fund. A woman my age, locked out of her own home by a daughter-in-law with a spare key and no shame. The details varied, but the pain was the same. Grief, not just for the money, but for the people we'd lost while they were still standing in front of us. Louise, the lawyer from Franco Zeppa, was there too. She volunteered twice a month, guiding women through estate options, drafting protection clauses, and quietly battling a war few people even see. She introduced me as a woman with a story worth listening to. I told my story, not every piece, just enough. When I described the dinner, the folder, the threat, the baby being used like a bargaining chip, the room went still. Then came the sound I never expected. Clapping. Soft, but real, hands meeting hands in quiet affirmation. I had stood my ground, I had walked away. Later, a woman named Rosa leaned over and said, "I wish I'd brought my son to a dinner full of lawyers. You've got guts." I shook my head. It wasn't about courage, it was survival. I kept coming back to the group, not because I needed help, but because I had something to offer now. And slowly, things began to shift. I wasn't just moving on. I was building something new. Not the life I had before, that was gone. But a life where I wasn't defined by what I'd given, or what had been taken. I was Elaine McKini. Whole, steady, seen. It happened on a Wednesday. Janet was sipping coffee at my kitchen table, flipping through the grocery ads, when she looked up and said, "Michael called." My chest tightened. He said Rachel had the baby. Just like that, everything inside me stopped. A granddaughter, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, healthy. Her name, Eleanor. My mother's name. The message was clear, Rachel was trying to pull me back in, with sentiment. With something she assumed I couldn't ignore. "She asked if you'd like to visit," Janet said carefully. "She mentioned visiting hours are flexible. That she'd really like to see you." I stared into my coffee cup, watching the steam rise like a silent question I wasn't ready to answer. Part of me wanted to say yes. To see the baby, to hold that small, soft promise of new life in my arms, and, for just a moment, forget everything that had happened. But I've learned to pause when I feel that ache. Because sometimes, love and guilt wear the same face. "What do you think she really wants?" I asked. Janet didn't blink. "I think she's using the baby to reopen negotiations about the trust." I nodded. The truth always lands cleaner when someone else says it aloud. That afternoon, I called Louise. "I've been expecting this call," she said warmly. "I want to meet my granddaughter," I told her. "But it has to be on my terms. No pressure. No manipulation. Clear boundaries. Then we'll make a plan," she said without hesitation. Supervised visits. Michael can be there. No talk about the trust. No room for coercion. And if she refuses? Then you'll have your answer. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter, not out of anger, but clarity. Rachel. I would love the opportunity to meet Eleanor and be a part of her life as she grows. But any connection between us must honor the boundaries I've chosen to protect my peace and well-being. I am open to short, supervised visits with Eleanor, with Michael present. Any mention of the trust, my finances, or past grievances will end the visit immediately. If you can accept these conditions, please ask Michael to schedule our first meeting. If not, I hope you'll reconsider, when you're ready to prioritize Eleanor's relationship with her grandmother over your relationship with my money. I will always love the daughter you were. But I will no longer be mistreated by the woman you've chosen to become. With hope for your growth. And boundaries for my protection. Mom. I sealed the envelope before I could soften a single sentence. Then I walked it to the mailbox, each step steady with the calm of a woman who finally understood where love ends, and self-respect begins. 6 months after that night at Franco's, I stood inside the main hall of the Meridian Community Center. 12 women and 3 men were arranging chairs in a circle. Voices low. Movements unhurried. Intentional. This was our weekly meeting, survivors of financial abuse by family. We came from all walks of life. Different towns, different stories. But we all carried the same invisible bruise. Maxine Mikowski, 72, moved like a woman who'd carried steel under her spine for decades. Rosa Pratt Kelly, just 60 but weathered by her son's gambling debts, laid tissues gently on the center table. Janet settled into her usual chair beside me. She liked to say she came out of curiosity, but I knew better. She came for me. Near the door stood a new woman, clutching her purse like a shield. Mid-50s. Impeccably dressed. But her shoulders were locked tight with shame and uncertainty. First time? I whispered to Janet. I'll talk to her afterward, she murmured. Over the months, I'd heard stories of credit card fraud, forged wills, stolen pensions, and emotional blackmail. The forms varied. But the wound was the same. And yet, beneath the grief, I'd seen something else emerge, rebuilding. Not the flashy, movie scene kind. But slow, quiet healing, the kind that grows like moss after a wildfire. Louise, now a quiet legend in the group, helped reclaim stolen assets, fight back through legal channels, and, most importantly, restore a sense of agency. As the room settled, I stood to lead. Good evening, everyone. For the new faces, my name is Elaine McKini. This space is ours. A place to tell the truth, mourn what's been lost, and discover what's still possible. Tonight's topic is this: what comes next? After you've said no, after you've drawn the line and the dust begins to settle, what do you build? For me, it was purpose. For 40 years, I poured my heart into being a wife and mother. After Harold passed, I thought my purpose was guarding the life we built. But now, I think it's something deeper. My purpose is to help other women protect what they've built. To remind them that surviving betrayal isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of strength. Around the circle, heads nodded slowly. Sheila, who'd cut ties with her son after he stole her identity. Eddie, who chose solitude over inherited manipulation. Carolyn, who filed her first police report at 74. Then, from the quiet, the new woman spoke. How do you stop missing who they used to be? She asked, voice trembling. The room stilled. You don't, I said gently. You mourn them. Even while they're still alive. And then, you learn to love the memory, without letting it define your present. After the meeting, Janet and I walked home together under the soft hum of street lamps. How do you feel? She asked. I paused, letting the silence stretch before answering. Solid, I said. Rooted. Like I finally know who I am, without needing to be needed. The burgundy dress still hung in my closet. But it no longer felt like a symbol of the past. Now, it was just a dress. And I was someone entirely new. Someone who had rewritten the ending. On her own terms. In her own voice. And no one, not Rachel, not Carter, not even the weight of memory, could move her again.